Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Vivek Ramaswamy, and we're going to talk about the dropout from the campaign of Tim Scott. So, Tim Scott just dropped out. Tim Scott is the only African American candidate that was running since the first debate. The debate is really the frame of the Republican race, right? All the people who are in the debates because they have because they, one, have met all the criterias, and two, have the ability to actually have a hard conversation, right? So it's those two things, right? And so Tim Scott is dropping out, right? And I want to talk about that, and we're going to talk about what Tim Scott dropping out means for Vivek Ramaswamy, okay, specifically. So first of all, I'll share a little bit about myself. So I am a bicyclist. I love to bicycle, right? Now I have been ramping down my bike. Actually, I had a very hard time bicycling this year. This year specifically was my worst year for bicycling. But up until this year, I would go up and down the East Coast. I would bicycle in Baltimore. I would bicycle in New York. I would bicycle in Philadelphia. I would bicycle in Boston. All up and down the East Coast, from about Maryland all the way up to Boston, right? And in those four cities, I threw it down, man. And I was so aggressive in my riding that my friends would often tease me. They'd be like, they would go on rides with me. They're like, Scott, man, you got it. So I was you got to chill, right? And the reason why is I grew up as a skateboarder, right? And I took a lot of risks as a skateboarder. So these risks that seemed to my friend to be very extensive was a much major ramp down of risk for me, right? And so they'd be like, "Oh, Scott, man, if you got hit by a semi truck coming around a corner, I'd be sad but not surprised," right? Because I rode pretty hard, right? And so let's talk about sad but not surprised with Tim Scott. I am sad and I am surprised. Okay, I'm very sad to see him out, and the reason why is there is somebody. So we're down to 5 candidates in the debate and 5 candidates in the Republican race for president of the United States of America, right? There are 5 people who have a chance, and now it's down to 4, right? Now I expected it to go down to 4. The next debate is Wednesday, December 6th, and I expected there to be 4 candidates there, but I did not expect Tim Scott to drop out. I expected that waste of space Chris Christie to drop out, right? I don't need to hear another word out of Chris Christie's mouth. He has said nothing of significance, and frankly, he is a hanger-on, and he means nothing. He means nothing in this race. He is a waste of space in these debates and a waste of space in the Republican candidacy, right? In the Republican race for 2024 U.S. president. He's wasting everybody's time. Everybody knows he ain't going to make it the distance. He has one attribute that guarantees he'll never be president, right? And I expected him to be out, right? I did not expect Tim Scott to go out next, right? Now, I should have expected Tim Scott to go out. And the reason why is I knew Tim Scott had no ability to win. There's no way he was going to come out on top between Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley. He had no chance of beating Nikki Haley. None. I do think he has a chance of beating, he did have a chance of beating Ron DeSantis. I think that Ron DeSantis is a chicken with his head cut off. He's running around. There's activity there. It looks, there's a little bit of spectacle, right? But it's all sizzle, no steak, right? I don't think Ron DeSantis is going anywhere. And the reason why is he has zero charisma, right? And I think the boots have shown another truth. He has no confidence. He's not actually confident. He feigns confidence, but he's not actually confident, right? He ain't even a short king, right? He's wearing, lifts to be tall, right? Ron DeSantis ain't a threat. And I actually think Tim Scott could have beat Ron DeSantis. He had no hope of beating Nikki Haley, and he certainly had no hope of beating the number one candidate right now, which is Vivek Ramaswamy, from the perspective of everything that's actually needed to win, right? Right, which are never reflected in polls. The idea that people are like, "Oh, hey, you all should believe that Donald Trump's going to win because the polls tell you he's going to win." Excuse me, every poll said he was going to lose to Hillary Clinton, and every pollster was wrong. And the same thing is going to happen in 2024. I can't believe like that people literally lived through every poll being wrong about Donald Trump are now pointing to polls to indicate his strength. It's absurd, right? Like, and this is why you're here. Pay attention, right? Like the world is not logically structured, right? You know, like you have to be intuitive. You have to pay attention, and you have to find your own path through this, through the information jungle that is out there, right? Because anybody who's like, oh, Donald Trump's going to win because a poll said he's going to win. Yeah, do you remember the polls from 2016? You could seal your flapping maw. Thank you. Next, right? It's so funny. I'm very sad to see Tim Scott out, right? It should have been Chris Christie out, okay? And I was surprised. I was surprised when I heard it, but I shouldn't have been, right? Because the reality is Tim Scott is not going to be the candidate, right? He's not going to run against President Joseph Biden. I agree with Vivek. I don't even think President Joseph Biden's going to be running, but Tim Scott was never going to be the primary candidate after the primaries, right? That was never going to happen, right? So, but let's talk about what does this mean for Vivek, as far as there are a lot of people who still believe that Vivek could get picked for Trump's VP. That will never happen, ever, right? In fact, man, I wish I was a betting man. I cannot be a betting man because I'm an evangelical Christian, but I'd put money on that Vivek will never. I would put so much money on that. And the reason why is Vivek's a threat, right? He's an actual person with real opinions, right? He's not going to get just shoved around and and seconded. Right? He would be an actual threat to every day, right, to Donald Trump, especially an 80-year-old Donald Trump. Could you imagine, right? So he couldn't get pushed around by Trump. Tim Scott can definitely get pushed around by Trump, right? So Donald Trump, I definitely believe this actually 100% locks Tim Scott is going to be President Donald Trump's choice. Why? Because I remember history. When did this happen before? Not that long ago, baby. Right? Let's talk about Kamala Harris. The exact same thing happened with Kamala Harris, right? Person of color candidate running against other candidates, right? Gets virtually destroyed numbers-wise, right? And falls off to the point where she doesn't matter. Literally drops out. And then Ward Cleaver candidate comes back and says, oh, hey, I need a person of color to bump up my numbers and make me look like I'm not super prejudiced. And that's exactly what Biden did. He came and swept up Kamala Harris, even though Kamala Harris said, I detest you, and said multiple times, you suck as a person, not as a politician. You suck personally. They were virtual daggers out enemies, right? I watched it because I watched all the debates, right? Kamala Harris hated Joseph Biden, right? But it didn't matter, right? Joseph Biden's like, hey, I need a person of color to bump up my to make me look less prejudiced and like I'm not preserving Ward male power, right? And that's exactly what happened. And I think that's what's going to happen with Tim Scott. Trump's going to come back and say, I need a person of color to bump up because I'm outrageously prejudiced. Actually, I don't even think that Donald Trump is outrageously prejudiced. He plays to an outrageously prejudiced base, right? And Tim Scott would be incredibly valuable to reassure good Americans who want to vote for President Donald Trump that he's not a complete fangs and claws out villain, right? So Tim Scott, he is a great man. I really like him a lot. He's brilliant. I think if you ran him in 1976, he could be the president. Right? He could have been our first black president in 1976. He's a man who's out of time, right? And but I'm very sad to see him go. I really liked him in every debate. I like him as a person. I think he's an actual Christian. I think I'll shake his hand in heaven. I love that guy, right? But the reality is, I think this is Kamala 2.0, right? And that does make me sad. I don't think it should be this way, but that's what I think is the situation. And Vivek needs to be 100% aware of it. And this is important for every Vivek Ramaswamy. If you think Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be Donald Trump's VP, you could think again. That ain't going to happen. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing and have a wonderful millennium.